also kind of one of the more familiar images in Christianity. Jesus as the Good Shepherd, in fact, sort of the oldest artistic work, the oldest artistic depiction that we have found of Jesus is not, Jesus on the cross or Jesus as a baby in the nativity scene, but actually Jesus as the Good Shepherd. That's the oldest picture of Jesus we have. So it's a really important image. The image of Jesus as the Good Shepherd, though, I think is so common that we almost sort of take it for granted about what a shepherd is. I don't know about you, but I've never really, I was kind of raised in the suburbs and sort of lived in semi-urban places most of my life. I don't really know many shepherds. So I kind of take the biblical images and sort of think of shepherds as these sort of kind of happy, idyllic looking people. They're kind of hanging around with their happy sheep in like beautiful pastures and stuff. Or I also think of, I relate it to the image of how bishops dress up for church. So they have their crook and they kind of, I jokingly say they kind of look like Loki from the Avengers movies. So these are the only images I had of shepherds when thinking about preaching this Sunday. So I did what any good person would do, and I Googled the word shepherd. Trying to figure out what, I get the idea that Jesus leads us and feeds us are absolutely important things, but the fact that Jesus calls himself a shepherd, perhaps there's something else there that could tell us a little bit about who Jesus is. So I did a fair bit of extensive research, and also just kind of thinking back, I went on a trip to the Holy Land about a little over a year ago, and I'm leading another one of young adults in the coming weeks. I was kind of thinking about that experience as well, where there's a place where there are a lot of shepherds still. And I kind of came upon, through all that research about shepherds, two different stories that sort of talk about who shepherds are today, and it seems to pretty much relate to who shepherds have been throughout history. So I'll tell those stories now. Because I think they give a really, knowing about who shepherds are, can tell us a lot about who Jesus is too. So the pictures I handed out to the kids during the children's sermon, that is a Palestinian village in the West Bank called Susha. And did everyone share the pictures? Okay, good. Sharing is caring. So, it's a Palestinian village named Susha, and it had been a Palestinian kind of a Bedouin community village since at least the early 1800s, and probably farther back. That's the earliest recorded sort of thing. But as late as 1983. Some pretty extreme radical Israeli settlers decided to start a settlement right near there, and because they found a sort of ancient synagogue nearby, and this was a justification for removing these people from their land. The original town of Susha was destroyed in 1986. At gunpoint, and people being kind of held back while the bulldozers came in and destroyed the whole town. And ever since then, the Palestinian shepherds, this community, they haven't been able to rebuild proper homes because they can't get the proper permits from the Israeli authorities. So they're living pretty much in huts and tents, like the pictures show. There's been, lots of court battles back and forth. Whenever you hear about settler violence in the news, this area is one of the places you're probably hearing about. One of the worst aspects about it is that the modern Israeli settlement of pretty extreme people has been built up immediately adjacent to these kind of mud and stone huts and tents. And so they're pretty much living in these tents and looking on a gated, modern suburban neighborhood. And that's what they need to live near. And yet also they experience a lot of violence at the hands of the settlers. There's an instance documented by the BBC in 2008 of a Palestinian woman being beaten by two Israeli settler youth, for instance. And when I was there, the picture of the guy, I don't know who has that picture, he sort of kind of looks really passionate and kind of yelling. It's like an international incident every time that the settlers go and they have their kids pee on his bread oven so that when it's hot, so that it breaks and cracks and it's destroyed. Yeah. Now, by the way, I think it's important to mention that in this instance, there's a lot of Israelis who are really trying to help these Palestinian settlers as well. For instance, because they can't connect to the electric grid, even though there's electricity lines going to the settlement all around them, there's a number of Israelis who have helped out in providing solar panels for the people in this village, for instance. And as well as whenever they try to demolish these tents and their villages again and again and again, it's happened like 3 or 4 times. They've tried it a bunch more times. There's a number of Israelis who kind of stick up for them in the court system and that sort of thing. So certainly this is not indicting all Israelis, but these settlers living in this neighborhood probably aren't the best people. But, so that's one story of kind of modern day shepherds. Another one that's equally as interesting, a little bit closer to home. I Googled shepherds in America, and all I really got was like about German Shepherd dogs. I don't know, just trying to find, shepherds nowadays. And there was only one article I could find, and it was like sort of a nice holiday Christmas piece from USA Today in 2010. And while we're thinking about the shepherds guided by the star by night, that sort of thing. And as it turns out, the Pacific Northwest, I guess, is where most sheep that are raised in the U.S., that's where they are. And most of the shepherds in the United States are Chilean and Peruvian immigrants. Because it's such a hard, horrible job that there's really no U.S. citizen that wants to do this job. So Chilean and Peruvian shepherds, they come in from the Andes Mountains, like the highlands, where they already are shepherds, and they have 3-year visas. And over the course of 3 years, for all their hard work, they only make around $20,000, and it's well below minimum wage. Of course, this is a boon when they go back to their home country. This is a lot of money, to be fair, but still they make well below minimum wage. They often have to live in these trailers with like 2 kind of just simple cots, a 5-gallon water container, and a cast iron stone to heat the trailer. So no electricity even. Colorado Legal Services recently accused, well, since this article, so I guess 5 years ago now, a number of ranchers of holding on to the passports of these immigrant shepherds, essentially making it so they couldn't go back to their country, in some ways kind of holding them as indentured servants or slaves almost. So this is just another picture of what shepherds look like in our modern day. And I did a bit more of the historical research, and this is sort of kind of always who shepherds were. Shepherds were never sort of these majestic, kind of frolic in the field sort of guys. They've always sort of been on the fringe of society. They've always sort of been out there alone for weeks on end. They've always sort of been just there kind of craving, I would imagine, craving for human connection. This is who shepherds are. So if this is the identity of who shepherds are now and who shepherds sort of have always been, I think this says something to us very powerfully about who our God in Christ is. If Jesus calls himself the Good Shepherd, after all. A very powerful image of Christ emerges. I think there's 2 things that we can draw from this. Number one, that absolutely, positively, God prefers to stand in the place and along with those who are feeling any sort of oppression. God wants to stand with people that are dirty, dejected, on the edge of society, just like shepherds, because that is simply where God prefers to be. So that's one thing. And so we know that when we help out people facing all sorts of oppression, that in a way we are looking at the face of Christ and indeed helping Jesus in a way. So that's really important thing, and maybe even a little bit deeper though, and certainly related though, is that we know that God, as the Good Shepherd, is deep in the muck and dirt of our everyday lives. All of us, whether we're facing oppression or not, is deep in the muck of our everyday struggles, of our illnesses, of our arguments with our spouses or with our parents, as well as our celebrations and the most cherished memories we have, and the best relationships we have. We know that from this idea of God as the Good Shepherd, that Jesus is just craving human connection too. Jesus is just craving to have a relationship with us. And he wants us to have a relationship and deep community bonds with each other as well. With Jesus as the Good Shepherd, we can learn a lot about who Jesus is. As a God that stands with the oppressed, that is deeply in the muck of our everyday lives, and that is deeply craving connection with us. And we further, of course, know that in the body, in the person of the Good Shepherd, of Jesus Christ, that what God does to kind of make these things happen, to make community happen, to make to free us, to save us, to heal us, to do all these things was to give His only Son. And in rising over the worst of human sin, and rising over literally killing God, God provides us hope that things can get better, and that death will not have the last word. I am the Good Shepherd, Jesus said, and this is what shepherds are like. You can learn a lot about who